Heads up, this podcast isn't therapy. It's bold, blunt, and irreverent, but it's not a substitute for professional help. Full disclaimer is in the blurb below. Okay, so today I'm talking about infidelity, not the tabloid version, but the psychological one. The kind that has absolutely nothing to do with sex and everything to do with escape, avoidance, and the terrifying act of telling the truth. This isn't a shaming space, but it's definitely not a sugar-coated one either. If you've ever cheated, been cheated on, or just want to understand why people set fire to the very house they built, this one's for you. Infidelity, why they really cheated and why it was never about you. There's a thing I see in therapy again and again. It's not really written in textbooks, not often named out loud, but it's glaringly obvious once you've lived enough life or sat in enough rooms with the lights off and the truth on the table. Affairs are rarely about sex. They're actually about escape. And not just escape from the partner. No. Escape from the self they've become inside that relationship. They look in the mirror and don't like what they see anymore. Not because the partner changed, but because they did. They became smaller, quieter, resentful. They stopped recognizing their own reflection. The affair isn't just about desire for someone new. It's actually about trying to resurrect a version of themselves that feels alive, worthy, and wanted. It is a bid for identity recovery disguised as romantic impulse. And it almost never works the way they hoped it would. Now here's the part that stings. They often want to get caught. Need to even. Because when someone's too afraid to leave, too conditioned to please, too paralyzed by guilt or appearances to say, this relationship has run its course, they do the next best thing. They light a match and wait for you to smell the smoke. They want to be caught because they want out. But they want you, the partner, to do the leaving. Why? Because owning your agency is terrifying when you've been taught that goodness equals self-sacrifice. Because owning your agency, that is fully admitting to yourself that you have the right to make choices and act on them, is terrifying when you've been taught that being good means constantly putting everyone else first. Agency isn't some mystical concept. It just means saying, this is my truth, this is what I want, and I'm allowed to make decisions based on that. You see, most people think they don't have agency, when what they really don't have is permission. Not from the world, but from the version of themselves that's been trained to confuse martyrdom with love. That to hurt someone, even honestly, is to be a bad person. So instead of claiming the truth, which might be, I no longer want this, they create a situation that forces the truth into the open without them having to name it. That's what we mean by emotional outsourcing. It's the fear of owning your agency, of standing in front of someone who loves you and saying, I'm sorry, this just isn't enough for me anymore. And that fear, it's not just about guilt, it's about identity. Because if your whole life has been built around being the nice one, the loyal one, the good guy or girl, then leaving someone becomes a threat to your self-image. You can't bear to be the villain, so you unconsciously create a situation where they leave you, and you get to walk away with your hands half clean and your inner narrative intact. Let's call it what it is. the slow, passive-aggressive version of running away. And while we're at it, let's go one level deeper, because the kind of person who cheats like this isn't always a serial heartbreaker. Often, they're simply deeply, deeply conflict avoidant. They would rather betray you behind your back than confront you to your face. And this avoidance, it doesn't come from malice. It usually comes from early conditioning. Parents, perhaps, who punished truth, families where emotion was suppressed, childhoods where conflict meant rejection or withdrawal of love, or simply being the conditioned, eternal good child who met the needs of others rather than allowing themselves to ask, "What do I need?" So they grew up with equating confrontation with catastrophe. And now, as adults, they lie by omission, smile while detaching, and cheat while hoping you'll rescue them from the burden of having to speak. It's not conscious, but it is devastating. And let me be blunt, that is not bravery. That is cowardice dressed up in confusion, scented with a bit of self-loathing and wrapped in a bow of, "I didn't mean to hurt you." Oh, they didn't mean to hurt you, but they also didn't mean to tell the truth, end the relationship, or honor the part of you that trusted them. Funny how intention gets so passive when the stakes involve someone else's heart. I say this not to shame, but to name. Because unless it's named, it can't be worked with. And here's the thing, not everyone who cheats is evil, but most are at the very least emotionally undercooked, starving for something they don't know how to ask for, or unwilling to accept that they already have to leave in order to grow. Now there is another option, staying and facing the chasm, the place where unspoken needs go to die, that has occurred through both people checking out of the particular relationship, because it takes two. Everything is co-created. So let's talk about the chasm, the quiet space that opens up between two people when they stop growing together and start assuming things instead. This isn't about shouting matches or dramatic exits. This is the slow erosion. That I didn't want to bother you. That you should know this about me by now. The I kept quiet because I didn't want to rock the boat. Well, guess what? That boat sinks anyway. Relationships fracture when growth stops being conjoined, when one or both partners stop evolving together and start living in separate emotional timelines. And it happens when people stop stating their needs because they want to be easy, low maintenance, or understood without having to say anything. Hang on while I grab my crystal ball. So let me say it clearly. No one's psychic. If you don't ask for what you need, the answer is always no, because it was never spoken to be heard. This isn't just about communication, it's about courage. The courage to name what you want without apology, to be authentic and real. The courage to say, "I'm lonely," or "I'm not okay with this," or "I need more than what we've settled into." And yes, it's terrifying, especially if you've been taught that asking makes you needy or demanding or really hard to love. But unspoken needs don't disappear, they metastasize. They turn into resentment, attachment, affairs, and silence. So if you're in a relationship right now, ask yourself, am I evolving with this person or next to them? Am I truly stating my needs or hoping they guess? Good luck with that. Because love without language becomes loneliness, and the chasm only grows wider when no one speaks across it. Let's be honest. No one has ever had an affair when their needs were truly met in relationship emotionally, psychologically, and sexually. Affairs don't happen in thriving soil. They happen in emotional drought, in the silence, in the I'm fines, in the avoidance of truth. They're often less about desire and more about starvation. People don't stray because they're overwhelmed with joy and connection. They stray because they feel unseen, unfelt, or slowly erased. And yes, it takes two to create that dynamic. But it only takes one to make the first move in the dark. And here's the uncomfortable mirror. If you're not asking for your needs to be met, or you're in a relationship where needs are chronically unmet and unspoken, then betrayal is not a question of if, but when. That doesn't justify it, but it does explain how preventable it is if either person had been brave enough to name what was missing before it became unbearable. Let's cut to the chase. Most men stray because in many cases sex disappears and they don't know how to talk about it without shame or fear. I often think, he didn't plan on becoming a born-again virgin. Don't they know how important sex is? And a bare minimum of twice a week is so important. A couple's sex life is a microcosm of their relationship. It's absolutely fascinating to analyze. Men crave touch, affirmation, and aliveness, and they want to feel desired, not just needed, not just tolerated. They really, really need validation. And when the erotic current dies at home, they start searching for a spark elsewhere, often clumsily, recklessly, and without subtlety. Hence, they get caught. But women? That's more complex. Because for women, it's rarely just about sex. It's far more about attention, resonance, feeling wanted, yearned for, and desired in the way she wants to be wanted. And if she strays, it's usually after months, sometimes years of unmet emotional needs, invalidated truths, and possibly invisible labor. However, if a woman strays, it's usually irretrievable. It's usually the end. And here's the kicker. Women don't get caught because they're not careless, they're intentional. They're the ones that often cover their tracks with planning, with decoy affection, and with perfectly timed distractions. It's definitely not that they're morally superior, they're just better at reading the room. So when a woman cheats, it's often a sign she gave up on being heard and decided to find herself again, but in secret. When a man cheats, it's often a signal that he felt rejected, undesired, or slowly shut out, and didn't know how to voice it. It's the same wound, simply different tactics. So I'm definitely generalizing here, and there are always black swans, as Popper said. So if you've been betrayed, let me say this. It wasn't your fault. But it is your job now to decide what you'll tolerate, what you'll forgive, and what you'll never, ever again contort yourself to excuse. And if you're the one who cheated, own it, not with flowers or pleas or declarations of I've changed, but with truth. Own the part of you that took the long way round because the direct road looked too painful. Own the part of you that wanted someone else to break what you already knew was broken. Because guess what? You broke it. Not by having sex, but by abandoning your voice long before your body ever left the room. For now, take a breath. You're not the only one who's been there, but you might be the first brave enough one to name it. Some relationships can be saved. Some can never. It depends on the people and the amount of work they're willing to do, the amount of truth they're willing to face, and the amount of reconciliation they're willing to process and journey through. I'll end with this truth. You know what people say, almost without exception, when they finally leave a relationship that's been dead for years, after months and months of pondering how it's such hard work. Yeah, relationships are work. But it's like the job that you love. The work is actually a passion and the effort is truly enjoyable. So no, I don't mean it in that sense. I'm talking about the relationships that can really wear you out, where the same rows occur, the same issues arrive on an ever-repeating merry-go-round with the same drama and the same dissonance, the same frustration, because it's not a good match. Healthy relationships are both effortless and enjoyable effort. Yes, it's a paradox. You get it. You also get out of that relationship what you put in. So what people say incredibly often is, I should have left this sooner. Not once in years and years have I ever heard, oh gee, I so regret taking the leap. What I hear is, oh my God, I've wasted so much time trying not to hurt anyone, including myself, and I've done the exact opposite. Oh my God, I was afraid of being the bad guy. Or, I kept waiting for it to get better, but it never ever did. The only real regret anyone ever has is how long they stayed after they knew. That moment when the body knew, but the mouth stayed shut. When the nights got quieter and lonelier, but the excuses got louder. Generally speaking, people don't regret getting out. They regret betraying themselves for as long as they did to keep the peace. And here's the thing. You can delay the ending, but endings come anyway. Whether you walk out, shut the door gently, or light the house on fire, truth doesn't go away. It just gets louder in your sleep. And here's the other truth, one we don't say often enough. To walk away isn't just leaving someone else. It's returning to yourself. It's making space for clarity, for healing, for realignment, because as I always say, wherever you go, there you are. You bring your patterns, your fears, your hopes. It's actually your presenting past. But this time, you're not dragging them behind you. You're walking beside them. Here is one of my unique quotes. When the heart leads, grace grasps it, courage molds it, and the divine unfolds it. So if you're standing at the edge of an ending, don't just ask if it's right. Ask your heart if it's true. Because truth, once honored, has a way of parting the sea. I'm Annie, and thanks for hanging out for a while with me on Soul Path Alchemy, where we don't sugarcoat the shadows, but we try to alchemize them. Thanks for listening.